Now we're going to finish off section 2.2 talking about the properties of the inverse. So some quick ones here. If you have a matrix and you take the inverse of it, you get a new matrix. And if you take the inverse of that, it's always going to get you back to your starting point. So that's kind of a nice little property here. Another one is that if you multiply two matrices together and you take the inverse, you can take the inverse of each one separately and multiply them, but again, it reverses the order here. An interesting property of matrix multiplication. And the third one is that if you have the transpose and you went to the inverse, it's the same as if you took the inverse first and then you transpose that. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about that because we're not going to deal with transpose very much in this class. However, the fourth property is the most important one. It's the one you really should know here. And it's the following. If A is an invertible matrix, then the equation AX equal to B has a unique solution for every vector B, and that solution is going to be equal to A inverse times B. So this property here actually gives a lot of different things. Remember we talked about before, we had systems of equations, and those are basically the same thing as having the augmented matrix, which is the same thing as having a vector equation, and also the same thing as having a matrix equation. Matrix equation AX equal to B. And so this property here, even though it only talks about matrix equations, it's really talking about all of these things since they're all the same thing under different points of view. And remember we talked about how we wanted to find out if there was zero solution, or if there was one solution, or if there was infinitely many solutions. These are the three possibilities here. And remember we talked about pivots, we talked about free variables, and those are all good things to know here. However, this gives us a really great method for figuring things out here. As long as your matrix has an inverse, then you are going to be able to solve it with only one solution, one unique solution. And not only that, it's going to tell you what the solution is. The solution, you can just multiply A inverse times whatever the right hand side was, and that will get you the solution. So this right here is a really powerful statement. You absolutely should know this statement here. And in fact, it's going to be part of something bigger called the inverse matrix theorem. And what the inverse matrix theorem does is it breaks up several different conditions. For example, have a unique solution and so on. And it shows mathematically that they're all logically equivalent. And what that means is if you have any one of them, you're going to have any other one of them. And I will say I have definitely asked about the inverse matrix theorem in the past on tests. So keep that in mind when we talk about it in future videos. But really this section 2.2 was about how do you find the inverse, and at least what are some of the beginning properties of the inverse. If you look at the book and you're reading the book along with things, which I hope you are, they're going to talk about something called elementary matrices. And that's just really not necessary for us. And so I've decided we are not going to ever cover elementary matrices. So you don't need to worry about that. It won't be on any quiz or test. Just focus on how do you find an inverse, and then what are you going to do with it. That's all that we're going to care about. Okay, that's the end of section 2.2.